Well, thank you so much for coming. I'm Rob Siegel, and today we're going to talk about the psychology of being an entrepreneur. I'm fortunate enough to both be a venture capitalist, a previous entrepreneur, and on the faculty at Stanford. And when I teach my entrepreneurship classes, inevitably the guests who we have come in spend less time talking about growing and building the business and more time about the mindset of what's involved, of the ups and downs that they went through when they were growing and building their companies. So we're lucky enough to have three people with us today. Let me do a quick introductions. Immediately to my left is Sudeep Chakrabarty, who's a partner at Lightspeed. Previously, he was with Andreessen Horowitz and Osage. He's actually a two-time entrepreneur himself, so he's now been on both sides of the table. To his left is Amanda Bradford. Amanda is the CEO of The League, which is a dating app. She previously worked at both Google and Salesforce, and in full disclosure is one of my former students at Stanford and one of the best students I ever had. And to her left is her classmate, Jason Soul, who's the co-founder and CEO of Cape Productions, which offers a variety of video services on drones that was funded both by Exceed and NEA and Madrona. He previously worked at Google X, got his master's at Stanford, and also another one of my former students. So welcome and thank you to the three of you for coming. Let me start with Jason and Amanda. What are the most important mental attributes that you have found in your time in being entrepreneurs and running your companies? What's gotten you through the tough times, and also what are the things that you did not expect? And Jason, maybe you can start us off on the left.
I'll start with two, and these are by no means exhaustive, but first is perseverance. One of the most difficult parts of the job is walking out of, say, your 20th straight investor meeting with another no, and having the willingness to walk into the 21st smiling and excited and optimistic. It's really hard, and it's something that, if you were lucky enough to work in sales, you might have experience with, but it's something that in school, for example, and in most areas, you don't get a lot of experience with. So that's very, very important, and also to be able to come back after those meetings to your team, to your co-founders, and make sure that they're confident, and your investors, make sure that they're confident is, it's very difficult. And
now, how did you know when you come out of those meetings that you weren't just wrong, that the investors were right, and maybe you just had this idea and you were wrong? Maybe you should have given up.
Well, after every meeting, literally every single meeting would revise a small part of my presentation or two. I loved the feedback that I would get, and over time I learned to respond to every question and criticism with, oh, well, why do you think that? Instead of just jumping straight to the answer, because going into these meetings you feel like you know everything. You're the expert on the subject matter you're presenting. So over time you get much better at incorporating feedback and learning how to better present your material. But you realize that you only need one. You don't need a majority. You don't need a plurality. You just need one or two to get on board. And if it's not the meeting you just walked out of, it could be the next meeting very well.
Okay. Now, Amanda, when you started The League, I remember we did an independent study project, and you were trying to find a new way for the younger generation to be dating using the tools that the older generation might not have used, more mobile focused and more towards relationships. And yet, when you launched the company, the press sometimes took some more aggressive approaches to you. They called you elitist. They called you trying to keep people out. That was probably unexpected. What was it like for you as a young professional trying to make her way, being vilified by many people in the press, and yet still kind of keep every day putting one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, I think, similar to what Jason said around persistence, I think having the ability to course correct quickly is something I've found really useful. So when something gets thrown out of nowhere, being able to kind of quickly come up with a way to, kind of use that information and then come up with your plan B. So I think for us, I wasn't quite prepared that, we'd be labeled this elitist dating app. To me, I was designing this for educated, intelligent people that care more, want to have more than a hot or not Tinder experience, and a classier experience, if you will. So I thought it was something everyone would get behind, and instead we sort of got looked at as an elitist dating app, which, to be frank, it did help to get a lot of press coverage. So there was benefits of that, and people had heard of us, but we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we get what our message is across and not just let the press kind of tell their story. So I think in that, part of our solution to that was me reaching out and really talking to the users, personally as a founder, writing blog posts, really getting my voice out there and not depending on kind of the press to carry our messaging, because they tend to write whatever gets the most clicks in today's day and age. And I think being able to kind of quickly see what's happening and then respond to it. And I think the same goes for, hiring and just any new data point you get in your business. I think the ability to change your mind, my team sometimes gets mad at me because I come on Monday and I say, okay, today we're focusing on monetization, and then 2 days later I'll be like, we need to build social networking features. Let's put monetization on hold, because I'll see what the users are asking for and we'll have more data to make decisions on. And I think the ability to kind of be okay with that and change your mind and be a little schizophrenic in some ways helps you make sure that you are, you're not kind of locked in on this original vision that might not be the right direction you should be going. So I think the ability to be flexible and to kind of roll with the punches, I guess, I would say is what I have seen kind of work well for entrepreneurs.
All right, so Sudeep, you have been at Andreessen Horowitz and Osage. You recently joined Lightspeed. You're a 2-time entrepreneur. What are the mental attributes as an investor that you're looking for in an entrepreneur? What are the qualities you want them to have, and what do you want to make sure that they don't have?
Well, you got me on the last one. But I think, much to Jason and Amanda's point, obviously you need, the flexibility, you need the ability to be comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. But let me tell you 3 things that I personally look for. One of them is pretty obvious. The other 2, I would say I learned over the years, but just by, working with people who are much smarter than I am. So the first one is, I always look for drive. I look for people who, either forged through their life experiences or otherwise, are just hungry, just have a chip on their shoulder. It doesn't mean they have to grow up poor, but it just means that they have to be hungrier than people in their peer set. So I always look for that, and I try to tease out in my interactions with the entrepreneur what makes them hungrier. And I think that's a very important attribute, because you're used to, as Jason said, you're used to hearing no. And from your customers, from your investors, hopefully investors are not that bad, but still, you're used to hearing no. So you have to have that belief and that chip on your shoulder. And unless you have that, you're not going to be a good entrepreneur. So that's one. But the 2 more non-obvious things, for me at least, was people with a strong internal locus of control make great entrepreneurs. And let me just define what I mean that. These are people who believe that whatever is happening with their business or their family or their environment, they have a fair degree of control. So they know if they do action X, they can make result Y happen. And these are the people who make great entrepreneurs, because they're not so much dependent on luck, fate, customer, going out of business or anything. They believe that they can make some of those results happen through their own actions. Great people to partner with. And the third thing that for me, I learned over the time that makes great entrepreneurs is the ability to involve. So what you want to start out as an entrepreneur is, you kind of start out as this passionate, visionary, artistic type, just going against the grain, and everybody is saying you go right, you go left because you believe in your vision. Again, you're going against customers, your investors, maybe your family. And you imagine something that most of us, just don't have the ability to imagine. But then at some point, you really need to evolve. You need to listen to what you're learning from out there, being out there in front of your customers, through your employees, through your investors. So you go from these, kind of passionate artists to almost like maniacal customer pleasers. And if you cannot make the transition well, you're not going to do great as an entrepreneur.
All right, so I want to double click on something. Amanda, you and I have had conversations late on Friday nights, on the weekends. You know, the joke we've talked about is you're building a product that allows people to date and connect and get involved interpersonally, and yet you're working 24/7 on your startup. Can you talk a little bit about the impact to the personal life and what that's meant for you about the things that you can and can't do, given the fact that you started this company?
The cobbler's son has no shoes, right? That's what we always say. It's my non-existent dating life. Yeah, I think, you know, I do make a lot of sacrifices. We've intentionally kept the team really small and lean in order to get to the milestones we want to get to. So I do a lot of the heavy lifting. We haven't really reached the point where I'm delegating everything and just sort of sitting there and saying yes or no. I'm doing a lot of the work, and I think that to me, I mean, that's the kind of entrepreneur, I mean, that's how you know you're going to be successful, if you're kind of willing to put in the time and effort and make the sacrifices. I think that's a really good litmus test for, like, if this is the right career choice for you. Because if that's something you really don't like, and that's, you know, something you can't handle, that you're working weekends, or you're working at 1 a.m, then, you know, and maybe that's just my opinion, but I do think that means maybe it's not the right career path for you. So, I mean, I tend to look at that as, like, this is sort of what, you know, this is what I signed up for.
Okay. Jason, what has been the biggest unexpected part of being a CEO, and a first-time CEO, and a relatively young CEO, that you did not anticipate going into the Cape journey?
So I generally consider myself an open person, someone who will just talk about things that are going well, talk about things that are not going well. One of the things I found, so in the early days, you said that, you know, you experience two emotions as an entrepreneur. Either you're about to take over the world, or everything is crumbling beneath your feet, and those are the only two emotions, and you're just going to bounce from one to the other. One of the things I found surprising is how challenging it is for me to be able to talk genuinely about those experiences. When things are really, really tough, you feel like you don't want to burden other people with that information, because it's just a downer. And when things are going really, really well, it feels like you're maybe distancing yourself from others, or you feel like you're trying to put yourself above others. And so it's very hard to feel like you have the opportunity to really disclose exactly how things are going on, how it really feels to hold all of those disjointed pieces of information in your head about, you know, how much promise there is around the corner and how much risk there is. And I always thought that, or I think that I believe that I have the ability to talk about both the peaks and the valleys freely with a lot of my close friends and classmates from business school and former professors, but I realized there are only a couple people in my life that I can really turn to for those things, and some for certain issues and others for other issues. There are very few people where you can turn to for basically any difficult or really exciting thing that's going on.
How much do you tell your investors? How much do you tell your board? When do you make that decision of telling them everything versus, I need to hold that back? And in full disclosure, I'm on Jason's board, so this is not meant to be a trick question for him. He gets a get out of jail free card on it. But having been a CEO in startups several times, I know exactly what they're going through. So how do you determine what you do and don't share?
Yep. I love asking for advice, maybe more so than I should. But if there's something that I'm facing where I do feel like underqualified, I'll always ask for advice. I'll ask my board, I'll ask advisors. I love asking for advice. And beyond that, like any piece of information that has the potential to affect the business and the trajectory of the business, I'll share, because I want as many smart people to think about these issues as possible. I'm only one person. I'm blessed to have two wonderful co-founders, but I'm even more blessed to have like an awesome ecosystem of investors and advisors that are thinking about these issues in real time alongside me, and that gives me a lot of confidence. Beyond that, like maybe every couple months I'll ask for advice on tactical challenges. Things that are very delicate to handle, and I want to make sure that they're executed in a way that is very smooth. But beyond that, I try to get you excited. So you also want to maintain the cheerleaders around the table too.
Sudeep, does being a former entrepreneur help you as an investor and help you in relating to entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. Especially if you have been a failed entrepreneur.
Well, tell us more about being a failed entrepreneur.
So yeah, I mean, my first company was when I was still in grad school. I knew nothing except for the technology part of it. And then started a company, raised venture money, had customers, but ran into some market conditions where we basically folded up. But being in that role where every day you are sweating about your customers, your employees, your investors, and then very importantly also your own reputation, right? I mean, it's like you're taking something on your own, and you could have gone and done a lot of other things, probably much safer, but you chose to do something that you're taking on yourself, you're putting your family's life on hold, and it's a very personal experience. Unless you have gone through that in some shape or form, it's hard to connect with entrepreneurs unless you have done that. Especially because I focus on early stage, I focus on technology entrepreneurs. It's a very important thing for me to have lived through that experience. And the lessons I've learned in terms of, that has nothing to do with technology, but it has to do with how you think about co-founders, how you think about bringing in a hired CEO who you never met before probably in your life. I mean, those are some of the life's lessons I definitely try to pass on to entrepreneurs, and comes from my failed entrepreneurship experience.
Amanda, you started the league as a solo founder. What was that process like?
Well, looking for, I was going to say, it's worse than dating, trying to find a technical co-founder. So I gave up. But no, it's interesting. I think you learn a lot. You wear a lot of hats. I was the VP of engineering for a long time, talking about things I really shouldn't have been talking about probably. I do have a technical background, so I leaned on that. But yeah, I mean, you're playing all roles, and I think it makes hiring those first few employees even more important than in a normal startup where there's a couple of co-founders, because you're really leaning on those people almost as founders to be there, for the ups and the downs, and to work late with you, and to be super passionate about the company. And so I think that's been probably the hardest part is like recruiting the right people around you, the first 5. We're getting there, but it definitely wasn't, easy, and we've had to kind of let people go and hire, and, we've had a little bit of a revolving door with some of our, early hires where you're kind of like, I need someone right now, and, how do we get someone in the door? And then they might not be the right cultural fit for you long term. So it is a lot like dating, I think. Ironically, but it's hard. I mean, I lean a lot on our early employees who've been there. We have couple people who've been there a year, and then also our advisors. So I'm talking to friends and advisors a lot about. My brother is an advisor, and so we talk about the business quite a bit. So I kind of feel like I have sort of co-founders by remote co-founders a little bit. But yeah, you have to make some adjustments.
Would you do it again as a solo founder, knowing what you know now?
Would I do it again? I would hope that on my next enterprise, I'll have a better network to then draw from. But I think, I would. I'd rather not sacrifice kind of the person I want. I don't want to start a business with anyone, right? So if Mr. Right is not there, I don't want to settle. And so I wouldn't settle unless I found kind of the right co-founder.
All right, Sudeep, any red flags to you? An entrepreneur walks into Lightspeed, he or she is going through his or her pitch, and all of a sudden the red light goes off of, oh, this is something I've seen before, and I don't want to fund someone with these attributes.
Well, that's a really trick question. I mean, what I look for personally, and I think most investors who have been around for years look for is, what did the entrepreneur walking through the door? Again, I'm talking about early stage entrepreneurs only, because that's the world I live in, not when you're raising C, D rounds. That's not the world I live in. So I'm talking about entrepreneurs who are raising their first money, maybe second money. And if they do not have a great understanding or awareness of the risk they are going to take on, it's a red flag for me. Because many times people come out of let's say Google, Cisco, Juniper, take your pick, right? And they are very used to a certain kind of life. And when I say life, it means both personal life, financially, and all of that, and flexibility and everything, and also the professional life. So at Google, if you build something, you probably don't have to think about distribution. Like everyone, you put it on a Google Lab page or something, and it gets distributed. As an entrepreneur, it actually surprises most people when they come out. Nobody knows, nobody cares about your product on day one. And if people do not have a good awareness of those risks, both professional and financial and family, they are not going to succeed, no matter how hard they try. And then if you have the awareness, then you can manage. You can mitigate some of that. You can control some of that. But if you don't have that, it's a red flag, and you shouldn't be an entrepreneur, honestly.
One last question that I'll ask all three of you, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Describe your best day as an entrepreneur, and also describe your worst day as an entrepreneur. And since Jason, you're at the end, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to come straight across here. What was your best day since you started Cape, and what was your worst day?
So very quick overview of what our first product was, and that'll provide a little bit of context for the first part of this answer. We have built an autonomous drone video service for ski resorts. So you find us on the mountain at your favorite ski resort, you check in, and as you go skiing, our drones fly with you, and then you get sent a beautiful, professionally edited video. Just a very quick overview. An amazing experience was toward the end of our first ski season. We were up in Canada. We had to start there because the drone regulations in the United States hadn't progressed to a point where we could operate it legally yet in the United States. Watching non-full-time members of our team, just people I'd met a couple days ago, fully run the service without any help from our full-time staff was an amazing experience with real customers, and watching them get their face light up when they see the drone take off, and the drone magically flies down and doesn't crash. Like, it's just, that was a really beautiful moment to see the engine fully working without us having to turn the gears manually ourselves. So that was really special. Most difficult day? I think in the early days of our Series A fundraising, it was very difficult. In hindsight, we raised our Series A objectively pretty quickly, but every week feels like several months going through multiple pitches and rejections, and as I talked about earlier, it's just really, really hard, and you go through this weird time warp, and it feels very challenging. And so in the early days, as the CEO, you're afraid of letting everyone down. You're afraid of letting your employees down that left their amazing previous jobs to follow you and believe in you. You're afraid of letting your co-founders down, your existing investors down, your partners down, all the ski resorts we started working with. And all of that weight falls squarely on your shoulders. Even though I have two co-founders, it fell squarely on my shoulders as a CEO. It was very difficult, and unfortunately that lasted for a long period of time until the moment where I hit the refresh button on the Silicon Valley Bank profile account and saw the jump, that was one of the better moments.
I got to experience that firsthand with him because we did the seed round at Exceed, and it was a rough ride getting that Series A done, and you pulled it off with NEA.
Yep.
Well done. Amanda, best day with the league and the worst day with the league?
I think the best day is anything to do with impact. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we're connecting people that wouldn't have met in real life without our products. And I think it's been really cool to see both just sort of the impact we're having as, we have marriages, and we're changing people's lives by a piece of software we wrote, which is always just amazing. I think for me, when I kind of wrote a post about, being an educated, intelligent woman and wanting to sort of change how relationships are defined, and, where strong women and strong men can partner up, and it's, you don't have these traditional gender roles that our parents, have kind of taught us. And it was a pretty outspoken blog post, and, a lot of, I wouldn't call it controversial, but there's a lot of comments like pros and cons as people wrote. And I think just it got circulation. I think over like 400,000 people read it, and I got emails from everyone all over the world, women and men, just kind of saying that really inspired them to like go back and get their college degree or go back and, not that I was inspiring divorces, but, kind of get out of relationships that maybe they felt were holding them back, and really to kind of take ownership. And it was just an amazing feeling to feel like I personally, this 30-year-old girl writing a blog post, just doing an app, is like affecting people across the world, and like what how they're deciding to go invest in themselves and their education. So I think that part was a pretty cool feeling to wake up to. As far as the worst, I think it's just, for me, it's been some team issues. Like I've had to fire 2 people, which is the first time I've ever had to fire anyone, and so we learned about it in business school. I remember reading through the script of what I was going to say, but it's tough when they didn't do anything wrong. They're nice people. You actually have a relationship with them, but they're just not. They don't have the drive. They don't either have the intelligence or the skills that you need. And when you're a startup, you don't have time to really mentor and develop people, and I don't have time to like coach them. And I think it's frustrating because I feel like I'm not doing my job, because I'm not developing them, I'm not giving them good feedback, I'm not helping them grow. But at the same time, we have to move really fast, and if they're not performing, we have to make hard decisions. And so I think that was probably the worst day, is because I felt like it wasn't really their fault, it was my fault that I was firing them. And I think that's just a hard thing to do.
All right, Sudeep, highest high, lowest lows from your days?
Yeah, I'll make it really quick. So, the worst point was definitely when we had to close down our first company. The second one is going much better. So, but when you have sold your dreams to people, who actually trusted your ability to come and work for you, it's very hard when you have to go back and tell them like, this is not going to work. So I've lived through that experience, and I don't want to relive again. But I'm sure things will. There will be some things beyond my control. As far as the best thing, I remain optimistic, so I think my best day is yet to come. But I would say one thing though, like a lot of my really great experiences these days are lived through the entrepreneurs that I support and work with. And I'll not name the company, but over the last couple of years, there's been one company. I remember going to the first board meeting where there were like 3 very young co-founders coming out of universities, open source community. They were absolutely scared, like anybody else, like anybody about 2 other incumbents in the space. And then you work with them over 2 years, you see their journey, and it's all to their credit, but you kind of watch them from the sidelines and try to help them a little bit. But 2 years fast forward, now the other 2 incumbents are dead scared of these guys. And that's a moment almost like you cannot describe, but once you have been part of that team and watched them go through that journey, it's just just amazing actually. And that's kind of what I like about my job.
Do we have time for me to do questions from the audience, to whoever's the gatekeeper, or do I need to wrap this up? All right. Well,
So
question over there? Okay.
Okay. So, the question to the panel. Okay. So, I think one of the things you said was, tough moments to actually go back and tell the team, whether it's closing down an operation or telling an employee to leave. How would you, in hindsight, you've done it, probably you've done it right or wrong, how would you do it? Okay. And if you had to give a bad taste and give a dose of reality back to the team, how would you do it?
All right, so I'll let our 2 entrepreneurs take that quickly, and then we'll wrap this up. Jason, why don't you go first?
I think it starts with falling on your sword very gracefully and owning up. Whenever you need to let people go or shut down an operation or shut something down, it is your fault, and you need to own that and show that to the team. To just be super transparent about why it happened, and make sure that they feel like, the rest of your employees feel like they're getting the honest story. Then afterwards, make sure that you follow up with people, because when people first hear that news, like, they'll be flooded with their own emotion. They may not be hearing anything else you say. So to make sure that you're there for them afterwards, to answer any other questions they might have, to be their strength when they need it, is very important.
Amanda?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think just everything is your fault. So just making sure that you realize that every time you're talking to anyone, you know, it's you as the leader. You could have developed someone, you could have given them feedback better, you could have shaped, you know, hired better so you didn't have this problem. So I think just realizing that, you know, that as you speak to your team and talk to them about it and make sure that you're cognizant that it's, you know, it's not you, it's not them, it's you.
You want Sudeep, want to come in real
I'll
quickly?
just add one thing, which is like one of the things that I've noticed is companies that have an open culture. So there are some companies, you know, again, you have to use your judgment, you know, how long you can do it. But there are some companies who, after the board meeting, go back and share the board deck with our employees. And so the employees are always on board, what's happening, where they need to focus, and what are some of the things they need to tweak. So when things happen like this, it's not a complete surprise. But then you have to use your judgment. You don't want to panic your team too much or, you know, kind of excite them too much. So it's a judgment thing, it's a trust thing, but I've seen some companies do really well when they have this open culture of sharing.
All right, so if I had to summarize this, what I've heard, 5 things kind of caught my attention. Entrepreneurship is your highest highs and your lowest lows, and everyone tells you that. What they don't tell you is that they're 20 minutes apart. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind as you go through the journey. Secondly, being the CEO is the loneliest job you could possibly have in any business. I'll never forget, you know, all the stresses that come with it, and it's a real hard thing to do and a real testament. If you're going on that journey, be ready for it. Third, always having a positive attitude is necessary and really difficult to do. And then I would also say that notion of leading and making sure that you step up and take responsibility. But finally, seeing your customers use your product, that's a great day. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you for your time.